And so once again tonight, the country faces the question, did Donald Trump violate the law? After America's first criminal president, Republican Richard Nixon, used the Internal Revenue Service to order audits of his enemies, including the names of people in the news media and other fields who were actually on the Nixon's enemies list, which was a real piece of paper. The President of the United States actually kept a written list of enemies, and it became eventually in history a badge of honor to be on that Nixon list of enemies. And like most of the madness inside the Nixon White House, that list eventually did become public. And after the House of Representatives, in a committee, approved articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon, and the United States Supreme Court ordered Richard Nixon to turn over audio tapes that proved he committed crimes in the White House, Richard Nixon was forced to resign the presidency, the first and only person to do that. Washington then spent years trying to wipe away the stench of the criminally corrupt Republican administration of Richard Nixon. And one of the things that Congress did was pass a law signed by President Jimmy Carter making it illegal for the president to either directly or indirectly request an IRS investigation or audit of any specific individuals, businesses, or institutions. Directly or indirectly. I leave it to you to judge whether Donald Trump, directly or indirectly or both, requested an IRS investigation to remove Harvard University's tax-exempt status as a nonprofit institution when on Tuesday Donald Trump posted on social media, perhaps Harvard should lose its tax-exempt status. That's not picking up the phone like Richard Nixon did and telling his acting IRS commissioner to investigate Harvard so that they can remove the tax-exempt status. It's doing it publicly. Donald Trump knew that that social media post was available to his IRS commissioner. Donald Trump knows that every one of his loyalists working in his administration reads every one of his social media posts. So Donald Trump had to know that that social media post was going to come to the attention of the commissioner of the IRS, either directly or indirectly or both. In order to revoke Harvard University's tax-exempt status or any institution's tax-exempt status as a nonprofit, the Internal Revenue Service must conduct a massive and extensive and thorough investigation for which Republicans have made sure the IRS actually does not have adequate personnel to do so. Harvard University could easily fight and win in court automatically if the IRS ever attempted to revoke its tax-exempt status, and Harvard would win that case on the actual merits of what the institution actually does do in its day-to-day operations as a nonprofit educational institution. And every single judge looking at such an appeal by Harvard would know that Harvard has been a high-functioning educational institution, a world-class educational institution for 389 years, more than 150 years longer than there has been a United States of America. Harvard University would easily crush any attempt to revoke its tax-exempt status in court, and the case would move very quickly. But Donald Trump's social media post saying perhaps Harvard should lose its tax-exempt status would be the smokiest gun in the case against any Trump IRS commissioner ever trying to do something so legally deranged. And so it's not going to happen. Harvard University is going to remain a tax-exempt nonprofit institution for another 389 years and another 389 years after that. That's the time horizon for an institution that has been here longer than the United States of America. And that is why Harvard University has built and brilliantly invested an endowment over the centuries that is now worth $53 billion, because their economic time horizon is multiple centuries. So that money doesn't look so big when you try to spread it over another 389 years. Most of that endowment includes restrictions on how that money can be spent that were imposed on the endowment by the people who made those donations. They made those donations for a specific reason, can't be used for anything else. Only about $10 billion of the Harvard endowment can be used in whatever way Harvard University finds necessary. And here's one of the most important ways Harvard University uses that uses the generosity of its contributors. Harvard is actually not the place that many people think it is. It has certainly earned the image over the centuries of being an institution heavily populated by some of the heirs of the greatest fortunes in this country's history, beginning in colonial times. The rich preppy is the typical cliche image that Harvard likes to give to the typical Harvard student, but that is actually not close to the typical Harvard student. The typical Harvard student is a public high school graduate who cannot afford to go to Harvard. The truth is that for at least the last 70 years or so, 2/3 of Harvard students, 2/3 of them are graduates of public high schools. And 2/3 of Harvard students cannot afford to attend Harvard. So Harvard simply grants them whatever amount of money they need to cover their tuition, room, and board, which is now over $90,000 a year, as it is, unfortunately, at many other colleges in America. Each Harvard student's financial need is different. Some only need help with about 10% of that bill or less. Some cannot afford to pay a single penny. And Harvard covers that for them, everything, including transportation and winter clothes for students from Alabama who show up in that northern cold climate without winter clothes. And that student from Alabama who needed those winter clothes and needed that transportation, needed all that help, can graduate from Harvard with zero student debt, none. And the students who are paying the full fare are not actually covering the full cost of what Harvard provides them, the full cost of what they impose on Harvard. And so even some of their costs in the college are being covered by the strength of that Harvard endowment. Donald Trump knows none of this. He knows nothing about how any university anywhere in the world actually functions. Donald Trump's Attorney General is now threatening to investigate every foreign student enrolled at Harvard University and to deny all of their student visas. Andrew Weissman is back with us. Andrew, 2 points. I think the tax case just couldn't be simpler. There is now an active question of did Donald Trump violate the law with that social media posting?
This is, in my view, a sort of extortion racket through various means, whether it's saying we're going to go after international students, whether we're going to try and revoke your IRS status and through an illegal means, whether we're going to just pull all of your funding for your medical school. And we're doing that in violation of the First Amendment. So I mean, there's when you were sort of asking, has the law been broken? My first response was, well, many. There are just so many ways to look at this. I am so reminded of the first impeachment, which was an illegal means of withholding congressionally mandated funding from Ukraine in order to get them to open a fraudulent investigation so that Donald Trump could say there was a criminal investigation into his political rival, Joe Biden. So many pieces of it were improper and or illegal. And that is exactly how Harvard is going to be portraying this. But they really are a victim of an extortion. And the reason, the purported reason, is because of Donald Trump's supposed hatred of anti-Semitism. And I don't notice his saying a word about the attack on Josh Shapiro and his family on Passover. That is just one example of belying that purported reason for attacking Harvard.
Andrew Weissman, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome.